recording. And oh God, the thing spoke to me. I swear it never used to do that. Did you hear it?
I did, yeah.
Recording in progress. I've never done that before. Okay. Anyway, so Jacqui, welcome to Life in a Garden. Like, we've actually been planning this for a while and never actually managed to get it with COVID and whatnot. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me tonight. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. You should be afraid. Be very afraid.
I am.
Jacqui, I have a question. And I mean, I've read your book. I read it from cover to cover. Life's Not Yoga is not a good name for the book, in my humble opinion. Why is it called Life's Not Yoga?
You know, the book was actually originally called I Dared to Ask. And then after doing some testing, some beta testing after readers, everybody felt the title wasn't controversial enough. It wasn't exciting enough, looking at the genre that I'm in from an international point of view, in terms of where the team that I hired, in terms of where the book is pitched, in terms of competitor memoirs. And you know, when I do the reading, as I've told you at the end of part 2, you know, I actually refer to the fact that life's not yoga when I'm going through the struggle. And yoga is very much a topical thing to do, to talk about these days, about being sort of very zen, or, you know, being introspective. And the whole book is about looking in the mirror. And yoga, it gives us this ability to, when you hold a pose in yoga, is to look at yourself and your relationship as to how we judge ourselves or how we want to be better. And it's all looking at our internal structure with movement with the body. And, you know, silent meditation is, you know, just sitting, where yoga originally used to just be seated meditation. So life is not yoga where we can just be in a contained environment on the yoga mat or sitting in meditation and being okay with what is going on in terms of our internal chaos. Because when we go into the world, we have to deal with not only ourselves, we have to deal with the world and people and crisis. And so the whole play of life's not yoga, or is it, is we know life is not yoga, but our response to life is about the yogic choice or the Zen choice that we have. And having dealt with all the trauma that I did. So that's where the title came from. And as much as some people are saying it's not a good title, it's creating a lot of conversation, and we kind of assess that would happen. And we would take advantage of that to talk about not only it being a memoir, but the greater, you know, the greater work which I talk about, the other work that I do, but how helping people come to find peace and joy in their life.
You know, because I mean, the book sat on my TBR pile for a couple of months before I actually picked it up, because it's a bit shuai. I don't know if I want to read a Life's Not Yoga. You know, like you go through so much shit in your daily life and like, oh God, what is this book about? And then I started, like, one day I thought, okay, just jump in. I thought if she nags me one more time, have I read the book? I better actually have said yes, I've read the book. So
Taylor. We love Taylor.
So let me start. Okay. So, and then I'm like, okay, right, now it's a bit gaudy. So I thought, now, is the whole of this book going to be gaudy? Because I mean, that's going to annoy me as well, you know. But then we got past that. I'm like, okay, it's not all gaudy. So now it's a story about a broken person, essentially. Yeah. Would you like to read us the prologue, and then we can start our discussion in earnest?
Definitely, I will do that for you. So yes, the book is, it's not very zen-y, it's not very gaudy, it's just a life story about a broken person and someone putting themselves together again. And at some stage we all break from a heartache, whether it's a lost friend, a lost partner, a lost child, a lost parent. We all face some sort of loss or trauma at stages in our life. I just happen to have faced a little bit more than most. So I was very broken by the time, and thinking I wasn't broken and realizing my trauma had impacted me and I wasn't on top of it. So the prologue is, you know, a creative piece of writing in some ways, but it explains where the main crux of the book, where I am in my mid-40s, up in Colorado, up in the mountains. There are 1,000 ways you can stare up at a snow-capped peak. But there's only one way that you can lie up there, dead in the ice. The mountains aren't here simply for our enjoyment. They are sublime, and I'm a dead woman walking through the snow. trying and failing to touch that otherworldly power. I'm standing 11,000 feet above the world and staring down at the wreckage of my life. I came into this life as a stranger. And now, after 8 near-death experiences and 15 years of marriage, I'm leaving as a stranger. My husband does not know me, and I do not want to know myself. I avert my eyes from what lies inside, the way one looks away from a mangled body at the scene of a car accident. I want to keep speeding down the highway and put it all out of my mind, but I can't do that anymore. It's screaming to be let in. It's hammering on the windows and smashing through the doors to be let in, to be let out. I am frozen, and the wind tugs at my clothing. If I stayed here and did not move, at last, I would die. Now I know why I traveled over 15,000 kilometers to get to these mountains in Colorado. I'm running away from the person I've become. I've been trapped inside someone else's idea of myself, which bears no relation to the truth of who I am. And I ache for someone to tell me what to do. I ache for someone to explain to me how I became like this. The snow keeps falling, and I am alone.
Alone on a mountain in Colorado is incredibly dangerous. In a snowstorm, no less.
Something like that. Yeah, that was where I was.
So let's go back to your exceedingly happy childhood. In the chat box, can you please let us know if you've read this book or not? Then I know how much we can give away and how much we can't give away. So you grew up with a father who is incredible. Okay, Chris, not yet. Good to be back in the room. Oh, thank you so much. We're not talking about me tonight, but thank you very much. Andrea says she hasn't read it yet. Roseanne has read it. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got probably about 50-50. Not a happy childhood, a really difficult father, lots of God being ran down your throat. There's Michaela, let's let her in. How did you cope? Because clearly it was difficult.
You know, when I look back through the lens that I have now versus the lens I might have had in my 30s and the lens, well, with my 40s, my 30s, my 20s, or even in my teens, what happened was there was such a chauvinistic narrative in the family. And I desperately wanted to be a boy. I had 4 brothers. I was the only girl. There were 5 of us born in 6 years. So my mother had to bring us up as a pack mentality. And I was, stronger than my brothers, faster than my brothers, or even if I wasn't, I wanted to be and I tried to be. And I just tried to fit in. And part of it was I idolized my father. And, he sort of women and people of color were sort of looked down on, and that didn't suit me. So I think part of it was I took on an exterior and I took on an interior as well that was very much masculine, up until my 40s. People used to, say that I sort of presented in the world quite androgynously and sort of asexual. My ex-husband looks at me now and he says to me, like, really? Seriously? You wear makeup, you got dresses. It's quite a massive metamorphosis and transformation coming into myself, or owning my femininity, or owning myself as a writer, as opposed to I put on this layer around myself as a financial strategist in the world. And, I was way more aggressive and I wasn't kind to myself. So I coped by being tough. I coped by disassociating. I coped by pretending I was okay. And then protecting the family as well from the outside world, because there were these judgments and these, these views about what was going on, but, putting on a facade because I didn't want anyone to look inside. I didn't want to look inside.
But you're a youngster. You don't realize you're actually doing this to yourself.
You got no idea. You don't have a clue. And I think that's the story of every child. And you know, all of us as we go through our various decades where we get to unpack. I mean, now I'm in my mid-50s, I don't really give a damn. But, you know, as you go through various stages of your life, you take those layers off. And for me, it just took a long time. But on top of that, I built an identity that wasn't, I don't believe was me. It was my coping mechanism. It was how I just, you know, the disassociated me.
Your relationship with your father is completely fraught and completely out of whack with what one expects from a father-daughter relationship, where daughters are generally the apple of their father's eyes, particularly when there's only one little girl.
Look, I think I always was, until we came up against this secret that I had to keep for him, and he fell into a depression. So my father, you know, if I think back to, you know, because the book whizzes very quickly through my childhood in terms of, you know, from birth to age 13, where we come up against each other. So whilst he was conservative, whilst I would, you know, have said he was very racist by nature, extremely conservative, very God-fearing, I was the apple of his eye. You know, I had 4 brothers, I was his little girl. But on top of that, you know, as I say in the book, when I turned 21, his mother, who struggled with him in terms of how he became as an adult, she said to me, you know, the day God made you, he was determined to piss your father off. So and Granny said to me, and God did a fine job. So I mean, give the woman, you know, credit for her sense of humor. But what happened was, you know, if a personality type was going to come into the family and annoy my father, I was all of it, including the fact that I was an outspoken girl. You know, and I talk about that, and it's maybe a piece that I could read of what it meant for my father to have a woman who spoke out. You know, my mother was very submissive, God-fearing, and you know, my father had the last say on everything. And you know, and then Jacqui came along, and Jacqui just, you know, questioned everything, and anything that didn't make sense to me, I would press on with questions. That's why I give that example in the beginning of a conversation I had with him that just didn't make any logical sense. Why could I not love my maid? She cared for me, you know, she was our nanny.
Yeah, well, I think all of us grew up with that sort of dichotomy in our lives.
We did, but some of us just accepted it because that was the family narrative. But my style was, as my mother said, from the day I was born, there were 5 kids in 6 years. They hadn't planned us in such quick succession. You know, there was the family joke that the last 3 of us were not according to the family planning committee. We came on our own timing. And she said, you know, she had to bath us all in one go. And she said, you know, she'd take my brothers one at a time and she'd rush us through the bath, and Jacqui just swam upstream. And I think that was my temperament. You know, she said from the day I was born, you know, that was just who I was. And so when my grandmother said that, I think that was, it's true, you know, that I was put on this planet to piss my father off. I'm really allowed to use that word. To annoy my father.
You can use that word, you don't mind. You notice I haven't sworn since I started recording. Like in the first 3 minutes of our conversation.
Yeah.
It'll slip out somewhere, I promise. We're not on the radio, but don't worry. Jacqui, in your relationship with your father, just once, you allude to what you felt was an inappropriate touch, but you never go further than that. Did you ever feel that there was the potential for abuse like that? Was that the only time?
You know, it was so after I finished writing the book, before I published, my mother and I, before she passed last January, spent some time talking about this, and we spent some time in therapy and, you know, discussing it, because it was very important to her, because she felt she'd failed me as a mother after reading the book, and she wanted to unpack certain conversations. The reality is that I know of 3 other people who have accused my father for overstepping the boundary. But there's another side when it's not to defend my father. There were just times I felt uncomfortable as a girl in terms of the way that he held me or touched me. And that in itself was too much for me. Now, I don't know if it was a part of an intimidation tactic as a result of the secret I was coming from him, or if it was because I was a girl. I don't try and over-obsess about it anymore. You know, there was a time in my life where I wanted an answer. I'm not going to get an answer. My father's deceased. He would not have the conversation with me. But I do think that my father, and this is something my mother and I came to agree on, is that my father probably suffered from bipolar. And because there was these two extreme personalities to him, one that was very kind, very giving, very sweet and overbearing, and another side where, you know, I refer to him as a monster because, you know, when he drank, he was particularly unkind. I have messages and letters over the years that are evidence to this. And then people who just thought he was the sweetest, most charming man out, but he definitely became very depressed in my teens. You know, my father wasn't a person that drank every day, but when he drank, he would be very unkind. And I pressed up against him. You know, I was angry at him. And, you know, that first poem is about the mirror. It was looking at where I took on those personality traits, as all of my brothers did. I think we took on parts of my father that we don't like. And it was, how did I silence that part in myself? You know, and I took on a masculine persona to impress him because I thought maybe he would be that way.
Your book doesn't explore the relationships with your brothers that much. Do you? I mean, how do they feel once the book came out, and what kind of relationships do you have with them now?
There was a period where, you know, my mother was sent to silence me. My father threatened legal action with the book, and my brothers were very anti the book. But then eventually, and they tried to control at some stage. I don't think they really realized they were doing it, but they were trying to control when my mother and I decided to reestablish a relationship and figure a way. And I even delayed publishing the book for my mother while we worked through some of our stuff. And then she got to read the book. But originally it was, Jacqueline, you will give us the book and we as a family will read it. And then we'll correct everything that we disagree with and then you can publish. And I was going, no.
I've already got an editor, Mom, thanks.
Yes, you will. And I'm going, no, this is my version of what happened. But what was so powerful for me is when my mother read the book and at the end of it, the first thing she said to me, I'm so proud of you. And she said, it was so amazing getting to meet you through your eyes. And there's certain stuff I didn't know. And there was a lot I did know, but I experienced it very differently because she experienced it through her own filters, her own fear, her own insecurities, her own perception of how she should pitch up in the world. And so that was amazing for us. And I remember her saying to me, and she broke down and cried. And she said to me, you know, I'm sorry, I failed you. I said, no, but that's what the book is about. You know, I love you despite. That's really was my coming to my understanding of all of that had to happen. Not only the things with my father, but some of the accidents that I experienced that were near-death experiences. All of that had to happen for me to become whole, for me to understand what our purpose in life really is all about. So at the same time, she said to me, I love your book, but I don't think I can tell your brothers. And I said to her that was okay. But what we did over the 3 years after that is we explored what it meant for her to have amazing relationships with all of her children, but that her children wouldn't come together and combined to have a last meal with her. You know, that I tried to organize, and she was devastated that her sons wouldn't do that. But they were all sitting with their own triggers and their own unresolved trauma, as we have came to decide. They might disagree with me, but we've never been a family that did Christmases and big gatherings. You know, we grew up as a pack, and they say in psychology, pack mentality, what happens is it's like an explosion. We all went and looked for our own identities. My brothers are all married. Some of them are incredibly conservative from a religious point of view, who, you know, do not agree with my beliefs. You know, they live in a very small fear-based world, according to me, and they have a different view on me. And we, you know, we navigate around it, but we don't spend time together. And, you know, when they're together, they get on, but they don't either really spend time together. You know, so weddings and funerals.
Did your mom blossom after your dad died?
Oh, hell yes. She even felt guilty about it. She said to me one day, and I said, no. And she said, you know, he's called, because she was diagnosed with her bone cancer a month after he passed. She said, the bastard's calling me. Like, Mom, I never heard you use that word, but she got to use a lot more cuss words after that. So yeah, we had a lot of fun. And we didn't excuse, we just decided we were going to do it our own way. And when we had time together, we had a ball. And I said to her, you know, she mustn't feel guilty if she needs to hide parts of herself because she loved her children. And you know, she unpacked with me, which was fascinating, a few months before she died, what she didn't like about each of her children. Yeah,
you love them, but you don't necessarily have to love them. I mean, like them.
But having the freedom. She felt she'd never had the freedom to express her anger, to express her frustration, to have that, and finding that space with me was just phenomenal with her, and knowing that we were going to do nothing with it, that she could be angry with me if I wrote a piece or a blog, and she'd say, oh, I didn't like it, and I'd say, oh, that's okay. It made me very angry, and I said, well, good. And never forget, one day she walked out the room, she came back, she said, I'm liking this thing of being angry occasionally, you know. So she really started coming into herself, and we played with it. You know, she was in France with me 2 years ago, and I'd taken her up to the top of my partner. We'd gone up to the top of the ski resort, and then she came skiing down, and, you know, she was in one of these chairs, and she'd never ever been up there in the mountains where I love to hike and ski. And she was at the top, and we were whizzing down, you know, these ski guys, they take them down at like 95 kilometers an hour, and her fragile bones with all the cancer. And she was saying, oh, Jacqui, I want, tell me about reincarnation. I think I need to believe it. I have to come back. So she made fun of the fact she was a devout Christian and her faith was so important to her, but she could be playful around things, even if I didn't, you know. I was like, Mom, I'm not even sure I have a story on reincarnation, you know. I know I've had multiple lives. I'm okay with that. And, you know, so it was just fascinating watching her be playful with other beliefs, with other concepts, with other thought processes, and then having the courage to talk about it when she had been, you know, for the first 75 years of her life, she never felt she had the space to talk about these things. And it wasn't about what I thought or what she thought. It was just, let's have the conversation. And it took such courage. And I still feel quite strongly I'd love to write the book that is very much brewing inside me, called My Mother's Voice, about healing the combined wound.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Jacqui, near-death experiences. Sorry, cut you off there. Near-death experiences. Do you want to run through some of them for us?
So I've actually had 2 this year. I was in a nasty car accident, which was horrendous just a few weeks ago, which brought up a lot of my trauma again. But, you know, a near drama, age of 2, and had to be resuscitated. That was a very clear one for me. I went to the other side. I'm trying to commit suicide, car accidents, caught in the snow, skiing accident, near choking to death. So, you know, things that have happened.
Jumping off cliffs to save your friends.
Yeah, things like that.
What goes through your mind when you jump off a cliff to save your friends? I mean, that's a completely selfless act.
You know, it was interesting because at the time you know, it was published all over the world, this thing that I had done, and I'd got these awards and Red Cross Gold Medal, first one since the Second World War, apparently. And, you know, people had gone in and assessed what I'd done. The way I remember it is that there was, you know, I'd gone over this cliff just other side of Gordons Bay into the sea. My car had gone over and I was driving. And I remember as the car was rolling, a conversation I'd had with a friend 2 weeks prior, that if you go down the cliff, you're not going to come out alive, thinking I had to get out of the car. And then as I was scrambling, got out of the car as it was rolling down the cliff, held onto a rock at some stage. And then seeing the car hit the water and thinking, oh my God, these friends are in here. And there's something that I know, having traveled to the other side 3 times and coming back, you know, having to be brought back in a moment like that, something takes over. It's way more powerful than you. You hear about people who've been in war, who have, you know, marched across fields carrying their buddy and, you know, their legs, you know, they've got half a leg kind of thing. Something takes over. And the only way I can explain it is I remember coming to a section where I looked down thinking, if I jump, I'm going to die, because I had to jump from rock to rock to get into the sea. I don't remember the distance. In my head, I remember it being 10, 15 meters. That's the story I remember of past. And I remember looking at it and thinking, I can do this. And I literally turned to my side and threw myself down, and I like bounced off the ground. And you have to believe in moments like that of a power bigger than you. And it's, you know, it's not this you know, it's about having gone through these experiences, and why do you survive them? Why did I survive the car accident I survived 2 weeks ago? It makes no sense when we look at it. But I remember in that moment, just before we hit this solid sheet of metal, I just remember, it felt like, you know, my mother's now my guardian angel, and it felt like she flew in and like held us, and this whole car went like woof, woof. yes, it was great German engineering, all of that, the car was probably going to have, but there's things that happen in those moments that I can only say I felt. I can't tell you it's, you have to believe it. But like when I threw myself down that cliff, it's selfless. And I think adrenaline's pumping at such a rate. The body is incredibly powerful in terms of what it can achieve in moments of distress and dissociation, and survive those things, and then act in a way that you can help others.
Jacqui, what about your
And so-
choices of men in your life? Your husband was not a particularly strong man, to say the least. And then your lover was not a particularly strong man either. Is there an attraction? I mean, I'm not going to ask about the New York, but is there an attraction towards weak men? I mean, did you marry your father?
I think I married my mother each time. I became the element of maybe the aggressor, I guess I would say. But the interesting thing that I was actually had an amazing dinner with 6 ladies the other night. I invited them over, and we were talking about the mistakes we made, some of us, being divorced, and I said, oh my goodness, for the first time, I'm doing something different in terms of the person that I'm dating. And even my boyfriend prior to this were men that actually wanted to be submissive. My ex-husband always said to me, you didn't emasculate me, Jacqui, I emasculated myself. He had big psychological issues with his mother that he, spoke to me about and dealt with. And certainly enjoyed the last few years he had with his mom in terms of building a better relationship with her. But, my mom always said to me, Jacqui, you choose weak men. And I didn't think I did. I was just met these guys. They threw themselves at me. It seemed fantastic. I was a little unconscious. I've tried to be more conscious since, the last relationship where I stood back and I thought, well, who am I really and what do I want? And I think I've got it right this time. And I watch myself through the process now in terms of how I am in the relationship. Whereas before, I think I was just we are always just responding to life as opposed to stopping, pausing, and choosing a reaction. And because of my trauma and, what happens when you're in so much trauma, you're working out of the amygdala brain so much, and having done so much work around trauma therapy for myself, I feel like a different person, actually. And yet when this car accident happened a while ago, I immediately went back into my trauma state and had to rework that out of the body with TRE and various modalities that I do to release trauma from my body, because it fires up again. And then you start reacting from that reactionary space. And then you actually, you're not functioning normally. Your brain is firing in a way that you're not functioning properly.
When I could see you getting involved with Dan and I could hear the stories coming in, I actually wanted to slap you. I'm like, girl, wake up. Every woman in the world talks about this. You know what I mean? There's not a woman alive who doesn't hear the same things. I'm leaving her. Our relationship is over. She doesn't understand me. I don't want to lose out on my kids. I mean, these are the stories you hear all the time. And you were just getting deeper and deeper and deeper in.
Well, that was the thing. I think because I had suffered so much trauma and I didn't realize I wasn't healed and how it affected my brain. And with that, how it affected my body with fibromyalgia, my nerve endings were always overfiring. Now that I'm well again, or I know when I'm re-traumatized how to heal, it's amazing that I look at the world so differently. And I can say honestly that it's only because at the end of the book, that's when the real work started. That's when I went and studied in San Francisco and really got to understand the impact of trauma on the body. And I didn't reverse 46 years overnight. That was 2013 that the book ends. And it was only approximately 2 years ago, I was in a relationship and I could see I was falling apart again. I thought, what's going on? And I went back to my trauma therapist and I think only then did the real key unlock in terms of so much understanding. So even though I'd done over the years these various modalities of, yoga to calm the body down, daily meditation, doing TRE, doing EMDR work, doing fascia work, all of these things that I needed to do to try and heal 46 years of trauma, as Buddha says, it takes years. Once you start crying the tears, you have to cry out all the tears you've been holding back. I went through hell at the end of, after the book, to try and put myself back together. And it's why I stayed single for a long time by choice. I didn't want to make the same mistakes, but then I immediately tripped into another relationship where someone who, quite frankly, if you ask me, thrives on the aspect of, someone coming at him. And I could see my triggers of wanting to and saying, I don't want to do this. And I, had to run from the relationship for the right reasons for me. And, and thankfully now I'm in a relationship where the balance is right, and healthy conversations can be had when triggered.
Why the need to write a memoir?
So for me, when, I talk about after coming to this understanding of having traveled to the other side of my teens, why I wanted to write a book. I always believed I'd write a book when I was 13, 14. I was going to be an athlete that was going to go to the Olympics, and I was going to be a South African, and I was going to make it. And, that's I believed that. And then these things happened to me, and I kept coming to the space of believing I needed to write. What happened was in 2002, my ex-husband bought this business, which I talked very briefly about, which ended up in nasty litigation against Deloitte. My husband had a breakdown. I watched my husband fall apart in front of me. He never came back as far as I was concerned. He was just a broken individual. From this person, our first 7 years were amazing together. And then I'd had a transgression from a big corporate. How could you do this? How could you do something, in my opinion, so illegal and so wrong, and then try and defend it because you think you can bully and beat the small man? And it triggered all of my trauma again. All of my father trauma came out. So the book that I'd wanted to write started coming out again, that I wanted to write. And that book I talk about was, If Only I'd Had Bruises. And then I wanted to write the story about our struggle against Deloitte and how we won this battle, which was at that stage called David's Wife and Goliath, because I took the battle on for him to protect him. But what happened is I fell apart in all of that. So once the Deloitte case was finished, I was actually broken. I only then realized how broken I was. And I hated myself so much that I ran from everything, my marriage, my life, everything. And it was in that I realized that the original memoir that I was writing it was a victim's voice. It was my anger, but it was in dealing with my anger and healing from my anger that this book took a life of its own. And, most people now see it as the mirror for themselves. It's no longer, yes, it's my story, but most people read it, get annoyed, as you say, get annoyed with Dan, get annoyed at me, and it's every trigger that we have, every annoyance we have is a lesson for ourselves. So the book is now written in a way that everyone gets annoyed at some stage. And therein lies the gift for them when they get annoyed at something. And that's what I'm loving, is when readers, write reviews. And I got an amazing review from a woman who was a cancer victim who's become a cancer survivor, because she read the book 3 times and she eventually said, "Oh, the book's for me, Jacqui. The book, it's got nothing to do with you." I went, well done. So people who enjoy the book, you can read it like a memoir. You can read it just like a normal novel if you want. My one editor found it too traumatic. She said, she's had a vanilla life. She said, I needed to read it as if it was fiction. I don't want to know anyone's gone through that. But people who read it and then see the mirror for themselves go, okay, here's my story that I need to turn around. And then that brings me joy. And that's, I believe, who the book is really for.
But so many people go through that, and they don't even realize that that's what they're going through, and they don't realize that they are being victimized or abused, and they don't realize they need to escape from it. They just accept that this is the way things are, because they don't have triggers to start questioning.
Well, they have the triggers, but they're so busy reacting that they don't even know that it's a trigger. It's a justification, and how many times we might be riding in traffic and say, I cannot believe the guy drove so badly. There's another way of looking at that. Maybe he just got news his child died. Maybe his wife has just had an affair, found out. Maybe his mother just died. maybe he's just got a headache. What about
maybe he's just a puss as well?
Exactly. But even if he is, why bring that into your car? You have a choice to not bring that misery into your car. You can look at it and just make space and let him go. And that's really what the gift of my book is. How do you actually take anxiety and misery out of your life? Why get angry over something you know nothing about? It happened. This event happened. This guy pulled out in front of you. Rather celebrate, oh, I avoided an accident. Ain't I cool? And keep driving. But no, we love to... And so my book is about how did I bring so much joy and pleasure into my life? I was so busy reacting in the negative. What if I just turned it all around? And
okay, so now what have you done to turn it all around? What have you been doing for the last 9 years?
So part of it was the cathartic process I finished in the book. I have a platform online. I have about 43,000 people who follow me on Facebook, where I talk about how to do it. I have a blog that I write. And then, there are 2 other books, because originally this book was the story and then the how-to, the story and the how-to. How do you find these practices where you can watch your conversations that you have around a trigger and then change it around? We don't all have 40 years to go to the mountain and become enlightened. It's, we just don't have it. It's just not realistic. But we can become enlightened around a single story in our life. And then how do we use that toolbox and replicate it and replicate it and replicate it? And that's the work that I've been studying and writing about, which I write in my blog. And that's part of, the combined wound, my mother's voice, how we heal that combined wound by finding that in me so that I could allow her to be her, so that peace can reside between 2 people.
Do you think it takes big things happening to you to realize that there's things going on that you need to resolve?
I don't actually think it has to be that. I think it often is the case because it somehow it shocks your DNA so much. But I think even small, you can have a pretty vanilla life and still be, as you said, an arsehole. You don't have to necessarily go through massive trauma.
I'm sure I never said arsehole.
Which word did you use? I didn't use it. That's on you, Mandi.
Please, if you've got any questions for Jacqui, please pop them in the chat box and I'll relay them to her with absolute pleasure. Jacqui, what happens next?
What happens next?
In your life?
In my life? Keep writing. I love writing. I love talking about the material. I've got readers, I've got reviews coming in from all over the world at the moment. It's very exciting. I just relaunched the cover. My audiobook, I've just contracted with a company in America that is doing the audiobook, and I've gone into studio because I'm reading the author note and the acknowledgements, and just keep marketing what it means to find peace in the world. That it's available within each of us to find peace in any relationship, and in that, whether you want to go to Jesus's work or Buddha's work or Nelson, I don't care whose work you want to use as your original source. But at the end of the day, when we can actually create that space between yourself and the other driver on the road, you can live a peaceful life. And in that, you bring peace to the world. So for me, bringing more joy into the world is something that matters to me. And I want to share how I did it. And that's people I work with, around sharing that with them and how to do it.
Finding love in the chaos of life. We're talking about self-love, aren't we? We're not talking about the love of another human being.
Well, love is actually, and my call to action is there are 2 ways to be in life: to be love or not. Simple as that. Everything is a choice. Do you want to be love for a situation or not? It's not romantic love. It's not even so much about self-love. It's just about being the being of love. What if, like Gandhi said, if you do nothing, sometimes if the guy is, just a bad driver or in a bad mood or just a nasty individual, what if you don't bring the nastiness into the car? What if you just be love for the situation? You just bring an energy of love, like space. To me, love is just space between you and me. And when I can be love for who you are and be love for myself and just accept you for who you are and not judge you. I'm not imposing any of my world on you, and I don't let you implode or try and impose any of your world on me. And I just look at you and I think, what an awesome human being. And we soften in that space. It's amazing what can be achieved in terms of 2 human beings getting on. So finding love in the chaos of life is really the existential question of why are we here? And it's that kind of love that I'm talking about. It's the energy of love, God, whatever you want to call it. I don't really care. Because I was told as a child that God is love. And it made no sense under the racist narrative that I grew up, apartheid regime. Where was the love?
Yeah, how do you balance that
thinking,
Christianity with a regime that suppresses people?
I don't care what religion you come from, what you want to buy into, but as long as it's, you know, not a specific dogma that excludes, if you can bring forth the presence of love into every conversation or every action that you do or every thought that you have, your whole world changes. And, you know, whether you want to go to The Secret or A Course in Miracles, and they're talking about manifesting a different reality, well, that's actually what I'm doing. I'm actually sharing a different perspective on the world, but I have to pitch up differently. And in me pitching up differently, in me being or bringing forth an energetic source of love, that's what manifests back to you. The guy in the car doesn't upset me.
Hey,
It's just an event.
sorry.
I don't dissociate. I don't get angry. It's just an event that happens.
Jacqui, who should read your book? Or why? Why should somebody read your book?
Well, if people like memoirs, that's the one reason. You know, my book has recently been compared by one or two reviewers to Educated in terms of the fact that it deals with traumatic topics. I mean, it's a very different book, but it deals with traumatic and hard conversations, and then the journey to unpacking them and what it means to the individual, and then, you know, the coming to a sense of freedom around that conversation. So anybody who is struggling with trauma and wants to overcome trauma, a lot of people have found that. Any people who are depressed, you know, I suffered from severe fibromyalgia, debilitating migraines when I was so caught up in my anger. I mean, I used to have violent convulsions with my migraines. And since I've unpacked my trauma and healed myself, not only psychologically in terms of doing talk therapy, doing other modalities, because we as human beings are more than just mind, body. We are mind, body, soul, and spirit. And when we work on all four of those elements, we can overcome any healing and really manifest what I call the miracle. But it's in the sense of having to be different with those things and bring practices to ourselves. And this book is an opening to people who want to explore more about any form of healing that they want to do, physical, emotional, as well as people who are just interested in, you know, like I remember my aunt read it. She said, everyone in the family should read it, but I don't understand why anyone else would want to read it. And I said, Aunt, tell me something. What kind of movies do you like to watch? And of course, she went on a how she loves scandals or whatever. I said, then everyone's going to love my book.
It's like Dynasty in one packet.
My tea, then read it. So people read it for different levels. As I say, some people read it just because, you know, some people say it's well written. I worked very hard with very professional and very competent writers to get the writing such that people enjoyed the reading.
Yeah, it's very readable.
Yeah, that it's a page turner, that it's gripping. So some people just read it from that point of view because they just want to read about other people's dirt. And therefore you can read it like fiction. And then other people are reading it because they want to know more about the work. They're looking for more answers on their own process of self-discovery around the existential question of why are we here? And they're then taking it into other readings or reading, you know, because my blog writing is more academic of nature in terms of helping people get to that, as is book 2 that I hope to have out in a year or two.
Does yoga still play a huge part in your life?
So to me, every moment of my life is yoga. Yoga's not on the mat. I'm doing yoga practice with you. You ask me a question, I watch how I feel about it. And then as I answer, I'll immediately watch, oh, I think I shouldn't have said that or whatever. And I just let it go. And that's what yoga is. Yoga is just a place where we can practice movement and watching our conversation with our movement. Now, admittedly, a lot of Westerners have turned it into a sport. I'd rather they be doing yoga than nothing. That's not my understanding of yoga. That's not the original teachings of yoga from my perspective. But I don't wish to get involved in how other people want to handle it. But yoga to me is whether I'm on the mat practicing yoga, whether I'm sitting in silent meditation, whether I'm decide I want to go do a heated class that I wouldn't even necessarily define as the original source teachings of yoga, but I bring yoga into that because I immediately watch my judgment. And I go, oh, you're here to judge. What if you turn this around? and you just be with what is. So I'm always watching that conversation. So yoga, meditation, play a vital part in my life and my healing process.
What sort of meditation do you do? I mean, is it focused meditation? Do you meditate to music? Do you paint?
I choose to, sometimes I'll do a walking meditation, but I choose a daily practice of silent meditation where I unpack the layers, and it's, you know, part of workshops that I've run, and which is a part of book 2, is where you first learn the practice of being in seated meditation, where you come into body, and then you work on the layer of I am also mind, and mind is just the ticker tape. So you know, when you watch at the end of on the news, the news broadcaster saying things, but at the bottom there's a ticker tape information. There was a da da da. So that's just information. So I take this book, I read it, it's just mind information like the ticker tape. What relationship do I have with this book? That's my soul. And that's like your personality. And then you look at how your personality or your belief systems, your soul, in terms of where you are in your evolutionary process, creates a relationship with your mind and your body. So with information or how your body responds. And when you work from the spirit, you can open up to beyond a single specific view. And so I work on all of those layers in meditation. I look at what relationship do I have with a thought. So my thought might be, oh, I'm suffering with fibromyalgia today. I look at the thought process. I unpack that and the emotion attached to it. Oh, I want to be a victim. I want to hold on to it. And I take it a layer higher and I work with that. And then I can release the pain from my body through changing my relationship with the thought, the emotional attachment. So I do silent meditation mainly.
Are you talking about physical pain or just mental pain?
Debilitating physical pain, debilitating where I can barely move.
That being from the fibromyalgia.
It used to be so radical. And that was just triggered trauma. You know, fibromyalgia, your nerve endings, they don't understand, but your nerve endings are working at such a high level because you're still actually in the trauma stage, working the amygdala brain. So a lot of my meditation is like bringing my thinking process to the center of my brain and my prefrontal cortex so that I can work with the body. But sometimes in that process, in my silent meditation, is being able to get through all those layers to come to the sense of calm and nothing, which has taken me years to work through, to understand the 4 elements of who we are as a human being, that I can work with body at times in my healing, with spirit, with mind, then with my soul, and then my spirit in my healing process. So I choose silent meditation for that, because for me, focused meditation is you're going to something else as opposed to coming. It's not that it's bad, it's phenomenal. But I think they say silent meditation is the hardest. And I find it very hard. Trust me, I'm human. But that's my chosen way. Yeah.
There's a sort of a group thinking that fibromyalgia is psychosomatic. How do you feel about that?
Well, to me, it's a very real physical manifestation as a result of psychosomatic reality. So whilst a lot of people say that fibromyalgia is psychosomatic, I mean, I never forget my ex-partner one day always sort of poo-pooing that it was just a lot of rubbish or whatever. And then he saw me one day where he said, you look 85. You actually look 85. I look terrible. I'm crumpled and I can barely move. Now, why do I wake up and feel that way some days? And invariably now that I've worked with it, particularly over the last 2 years, as like when I had this car accident recently, and immediately my brain went into, I'm like a machine under pressure. You want me on the battlefield, because my body responds to it, and I was sorting everything out, got my partner out the car, made the judgment calls, watching everything, but I disassociate. So, but then what happens is the body's actually absorbing the trauma. And what started happening after not having fibromyalgia for 18 months, the fibromyalgia kicked in again. Because what had happened is in the trauma, my body had gone into the amygdala brain, and I didn't spend enough time because I was in the middle of the move and we were going away for 3 weeks, and I didn't have enough time to do the work and I could feel it building. And I kept thinking, oh, I must go and, I must be on my cushion more. I must go do this. And I didn't. And the ego loves to hook us into trauma, loves to break us down, the unhealthy part of our ego. And I could watch it and I could say, but why am I not doing it? Why am I not doing my TRE? And then I would find an excuse. And, oh, no, I'm strong enough. I can cope with this. And bang, it hit me again. And so do I believe it's only purely psychosomatic? It comes from psychosomatic trauma, yes, but it can also come from physical trauma. In terms of the body becomes overfired, how do you reverse it? I believe there's a whole lot of things that you can do. For me, one of the most powerful things is TRE and training my brain to work from the prefrontal cortex. So it's not overfiring in the amygdala brain.
So essentially one has to work on oneself constantly. It's not a case of, hey, I've worked on this and I'm now like all shua and I'm fine. You've just got to keep at it.
Well, I think it doesn't matter, once again, whose teachings you go to. In summation, whether it was Buddha or Jesus or Gandhi, that's basically what they said to us. So, you know, I don't think I'm ever going to be as enlightened as any of them. I'm certainly going to aspire, but if we listen to them, that's what they said. So the whole human journey is you only, you know, that moment before death is the final coming to what is or what was. So yes, if we want to be on a growth trajectory, we're always working. If we want to be continually healing from trauma or healing from a story, yes, it's continual work. You don't have to do the work.
Jacqui, there's a comment here from Andrea that I'd like to read for you. Thank you for sharing your story. Love being the being of love. Just be love. Space between you and me. Awesome, Jacqui. And then she said, where is the book available?
So it's available everywhere around the world on all online platforms. And then in South Africa, you can get it on Loot, Take-A-Lot, Exclusive Books, their online platform, as well as exclusive stores can order it in. Bargain Books, Words with Books are all stocking it already in South Africa.
Okay,
and
so it's really
around the world. Yeah, all ebooks around the world, all your Amazon platforms, Kindle, Apple ebook, any ebook platform that you've got. Yeah.
Any idea how much it is?
So your e-platforms are, it's at $10, and if you've got taxes, depending on the country, you know, that if you're on a .com platform or a UK platform, they're taxes. So it can be at about, I think just under $12. And then in South African rands in stores, it's 340 Rand. I know Take-A-Lot and Loot Cash have discount things, as well as Balakuda has a discount price, but I think they charge a shipping fee, one of them.
Thank you.
So Balakuda is also an online retail platform for hard copies in South Africa.
So Mariana says, thank you for being so brave to share in this way. I can't get to the beginning of this. I'm trying desperately to. Thank you for an amazing book. It's like parallel to my life. You give me inspiration to keep going. I'm just a few years behind you. I'm curious to know if you would share your Myers-Briggs personality type for interest. Have you done your Myers-Briggs?
Dude, but I don't buy into any of that. So I'm one of those that falls very much, I'm very left, you know, I have a finance degree and I'm a poet actually. So I'm very left, right, balanced brain. I have a strong introvert and a strong extrovert, but I'm apparently ENTP. I don't pay attention to those things, sorry.
It makes you an ambivert.
Sorry?
An ambivert. You like people, you just like people, and you're quite happy at home, you know. Ambivert.
It's I think for me, I need space for all of it. They all matter, but I think I'm an ENTP or whatever. It's a long time ago since I did that. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to please read that poem we were talking about at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, so Mariana, if I'm correct, Mariana's read the book, hey?
Mariana hasn't read the book, no.
Read the book.
But
no. Who had read the book?
Who had read the book? Andrea hasn't. Roseanne's read it.
Oh, Roseanne.
Yeah.
Is it Roseanne Versace?
Yes, Roseanne Versace.
Roseanne Versace gave me one of the most amazing reviews. Please go to her website and have a look. Okay, so at the start, so the book is split into 3 parts, and part 1 is really about my childhood. Burning Shame, it's titled, and it's dedicated to my father. Part 2 is Burning Bridges, which is really I'm sort of in my mid-40s and I'm trying to figure out how the hell I haven't figured things out. I'm an adult, I kind of thought I had or should have, but I haven't. And that's Burning Bridges, and that's dedicated to my mother. And then part 3 is Rising Phoenix, which is dedicated to myself. Actually, can I read all 3 poems? Do you mind?
Yeah.
They're quite short. Okay. So for part 1, Burning Bridges, this is for my father. My imperfections are my beauty spots, along life's mirrored wall. I wear their scars externally, so you can see them all. My shame, my guilt, my blame, my doubt, my inner critic's plea, the freedom from their sight and sound, projection's gift to be. I know now that your mirror's truth reflects the perfect me, uncomplicated for its grace. My heart gives thanks to thee. That's for my dad. And then part 2 is dedicated to my mother. And as you'll find out, I attempt suicide a few times in my teenage years. And part 2 is I'm 45 and I'm heading up to the mountains and realize that I actually have a death wish for my mother. No will to live, I do confess, a wish to die today. Lost in hell, I'm in distress. I cannot find a way. The screaming truth of this desire to end it all I see is in the shadow of myself and not, in truth, me. And then, as you will find in the Rising Phoenix part of the book, where I find this answer to be love. And as I said, I'm told as a child that God is love. And this poem for myself, which speaks to where I am in my teens, for myself. I wanted God to be external, as I wanted someone to name. I wanted God to be external, as I wanted someone to explain. I wanted God to be external, as I wanted someone to blame. So if you deal with any shame, guilt, or blame, then this book helps you in some ways figure out how I did it to get over it. And I have a lot of shame stories, and I have a lot of blame stories, and I have a lot of guilt stories that I share with you in my book. A ton of them.
Roseanne writes, thank you so much for mentioning me, Jacqui. I find your story so motivating and powerful that I'm currently rereading your book and still finding new inspiration. It's like a diamond where the light falls different on each side. It's lovely. Many facets. And then last one from Natasha, your poetry is important, Jacqui. Thank you for these lessons.
Thank you, Natasha.
And thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm so glad we finally managed to get it right.
Thank you.
Now for a little bit of marketing. If anybody, if the new people who've joined us this evening would like to join us more often, I have a website. No, I don't have a website. There's a Facebook group, there's a Facebook page, and there's a WhatsApp broadcast group. So no chit chat. Merle, are you waving at me or telling somebody to shut up? So the things that are coming are this book, Facets. We were talking about diamonds. This is about diamonds and other big issues by Michael Stanley. I love the way they write. And then I thought we would have some fun because Linda Shaw's got a new book out called Horoscope Hotties, Finding the Best Lovers in the Zodiac. And guess what? Scorpio, China, up there. What star sign are you, Jacqui?
I'm Aries.
The Aries. What does it say about you? She starts with Aries. The whole book, the book opens with bloody Aries. I don't know why it starts in the middle of the zodiac. So let me just tell you about Jacqui quickly. Who is she really?
Who am I?
If there's one place you're highly unlikely to find this delightful creature, it's in the kitchen. So what's on the menu tonight? Takeaways. Not that she couldn't rustle up an excellent curry if she absolutely had to, but as she would quite seriously tell herself, what's the point when you can get takeaways in half the time? Well, there you go. Takeaways on the menu tonight. Jacqui, thank you so much. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who made donations, thank you for that. And we'll meet again. Be good. Go well.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Bye.